Now in studio, in order to dismantle this issue further, we have the EFF's Tokelo Nhlapo and Wits Vuvuzela's Rofhiwa. We also have Professor Franz Kruger, the acting head of Wits journalism. Good evening to everybody.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Now, Rofhiwa, do you mind explaining to us your findings in the story and what exactly led to your decision to publish it?
Well, the initial story was done of Mngabo Sisulu. Was done during the election period, and what we wanted to do was get some commentary from someone who's closely affiliated with the family. What we then did is that afterwards there were various inconsistencies in the story that he told us about being a Sisulu and growing up in Orlando West. So obviously as a journalist you don't just leave it to investigate further, and that's what we did. And when we did, we found various incongruencies in the story that he was telling people, which eventually led to the fact that he was telling a lie.
Okay, so Tokelo, we've touched on a few of your objectives, but we want you to state what exactly are your main concerns regarding the Vuvuzela article.
Lesego, before we even go there, can I just throw a question at Tokelo? I mean, one of the concerning...
Why is I'm answering the question.
Yes, and I just wanted to, before we get into the substance of the criticism, which I think we do have to discuss, and we're quite happy to do that. I mean, one of the concerning things has been the kind of intimidatory stuff that has been going on Twitter. And one is not saying that, you know, that's been coming from the EFF, but I would like just Tokelo, in his response, also to address the tone in which we should be holding this debate. I mean, I do think we owe it to each other to speak, you know, in an ordinary kind of way, in a rational way, as befits a university.
Okay, Tokelo, do you mind giving us your response to that?
Thanks, my sister. I'm not going to respond to Franz. I'm going to respond to you. First of all, our contention with the article is that, look, it assumes that the gentleman is powerful. Mngabo is not powerful. He is a chairperson of a university residence. But also the article cannot prove that through the use of the name Sisulu, it has gotten him any sort of material benefit whatsoever. And we believe that Wits Vuvuzela does not have the interest of students. I mean, assuming that the claims by Vuvuzela are true, why not refer the poor young man to CCDU? Why is it so easy for Franz to allow his journalists to publish such a story at such a crucial time of his career than to help the gentleman? We believe that the article was distasteful, it was sensational, and it was unnecessary. And we believe that, I'm sorry to have, high standards for a publication that is produced by honest students to write about personal lives of students. We believe that the article should not have been published. If they felt it was necessary to publish it, it would have had more or less the same impact had it been published after the exam.
That's pretty interesting.
And we believe that it was so easy for Franz to allow his journalists to publish the story because, he is racist. And that's why it was so easy for him.
Can I just object to that, please? Because there's no evidence for that at all. And I really think it reflects a kind of a red herring in this whole discussion.
Franz, sorry to interject. We will be discussing what he just mentioned in the following question. But before we address that to him, we just want to find out what exactly is your response to that, because he's also cited in the Vuvuzela summary that he's referred to you as a non-apologetic white racist. Now, what is your response to that?
Well, it's just rubbish. And there's no evidence for it. And it is, as I say, a red herring to introduce it into this whole situation. I mean, he keeps on talking about allowing students. I had no idea that this story was even being worked on until it appeared. In fact, until it was drawn to my attention that there was a statement. So, my involvement in this thing only started after it was published. There were other people.
Franz, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So, the first question is Mngabo powerful? powerful such that the name of Sisulu provided him with any sort of material or financial benefit? And if so, what is the point of the story?
Rofhiwa, maybe you can answer that because you're the person who ran with the story. Why did you choose to then run with Sisulu if the community feels like he doesn't have a powerful...
Okay, well, you look, Mkabo is a student leader and SASCO has cited that he is a student leader. The fact that he's head of Housecom means a whole lot. And I'm sure you've kept up with the tweets that were going on, but I mean, there was a message from a certain student who said, had she known that this is what he was doing, her vote would have never gone to him, as head of Housecom. So it's disturbed a lot of people because a lot of people allowed someone who was virtually a fraud to lead them. And that's what I think the core issue is here. Tokelo, no matter what you say about how this benefited him in any way, we won't know what his lies, we don't know his thinking behind the reasons that he lied. But the fact that people were trusting someone who wasn't even honest with himself about who he was is the core issue. And it's very worrying that SASCO and Wits EFF are releasing statements that they have, because then it kind of alludes to the fact that you guys are okay with people lying. You're okay with people that are wanting to be leaders. They start being leaders of the student bodies and then they move on to bigger positions. You're okay with people carrying themselves on a lie. And that, I think, is one of the core issues. It's not an assumption. It is not an assumption. Because you have...
Look, I think it's an assumption. I think what Vuvuzela missed here was an opportunity for the Wits community to discuss a bigger issue here, which is the role of, so-called struggle credentials in political movements. Rather than sensationalizing the story and ridiculing the young man.
How many students do you think would enjoy an article about struggle credentials?
Sorry to interject there. I kind of almost...
So you agree you are being
sensational? No. We were not being sensational. I think what we did here is we used the struggle credential thing that you're saying and saw how people abuse that. How they just adopt things, with no authority, with no basis. That's what I think is important, how someone can do that and then think he can get away with it. There's no broader issue here. It's someone who was posing as a leader to the students, someone who was doing well for students, who went on to lie. And that is the issue.
Tokelo.
Yeah.
Just to move on a bit, we do understand that she did have a problem with the race issue, but we also want to find out from you about the merits of the story itself. Sure. Rofhiwa has mentioned that he is a student leader, and if they don't report on the fact that he lied, it's almost misleading to us as students. So we want to know from the EFF, are you guys saying that as a community at Wits, do we not then have the right to know when a student leader is discovered to be dishonest?
Look, we are a political organization, and we believe that the media on campus should remain independent. So we can't really prescribe to Vuvuzela how they must run their business. But I think that Vuvuzela must be, socially responsible by considering all factors. And I think that in the publishing of the story, Vuvuzela did not consider all the factors. They didn't consider the fact that the young man was writing exam the day before they published the article. So whether or not the claims of Vuvuzela or this young man were true, they were going to affect his performance in the exam the following day. Now, had the article been published after the exam, students were still going to talk about it. We would have probably be having a different discussion. And I think that although Vuvuzela has the responsibility to tell us about the things that happen on campus and that it's honesty of the young man as it alleges, I think that they would have been more socially responsible had they considered the issues that we have raised. But also, I think that it's ridiculous that Wits Vuvuzela is going to say, I don't know what. On my Twitter handle, for example, it says researcher intern at the Afro Middle East Center. I've left like a month ago, but it still says that. So is Vuvuzela going to write an article or Tokelo is lying? He actually left the Afro Middle East Center as a researcher a month ago.
Thank you so much.
Are they going to interrogate where I come from? I mean, in my Facebook status, my birth date is not 1990, it's 1985.
Tokelo, we do see the point that you're trying to make as to, is Vuvuzela now going to try and discover all the dishonesties that all students have? Rofhiwa, what do you have to say in response?
It's okay for me to respond to that. First of all, with the timing, we need to emphasize that we did not specifically go out to target Nhlapo just before his exams. This story came about during election period, and because of the inconsistencies which I mentioned earlier, we needed to investigate further. And it just so happened that the investigation ended and the story came together at this time. You also need to understand that Nhlapo is a student leader, and as soon as you are a leader or a political figure on campus, provincially or nationally, you have opened yourself up to scrutiny.
Look,
you have opened yourself up to public scrutiny. It comes with being a leader. That is what you have decided to do.
Rofhiwa.
And one more thing, before I finish.
Tokelo
I deserve the respect that I have given you to finish making my comment, please.
Which is basically volunteer work. It provides him with no financial benefit whatsoever or material.
Tokelo, thank you so much for your concern. We do see that you feel passionately about this. Rofhiwa, we also just want to find out from you, do you have any closing comments with regard to the story?
Closing comments. I need to say that this has got no racism attached to it at all. The people that you spoke about in your statement that you released about France, Anton, and Joanne is very irrelevant, because you kind of imply that we are unable to go out autonomously and put together stories of our own. Their job is to equip us with the understanding of how to do the job. The rest is left to us. And at no stage ever have I ever felt controlled by any one of these people. And I think you need to understand that before you go around making those kinds of accusations. It's very undermining. Another thing that I want to say is that this is not a tabloid kind of story, nor was it sensationalized. Everything that is in the story is based on fact.
Rofhiwa,
and that's what you need to understand.
Just on that point, you did listen to some of the voices from the community, and some of them do argue that, okay, fine, he lied, but he didn't break any laws. So why did you guys still feel that it's a critical story to run with?
It goes back to what I said before. He's a student leader. The fact that he's lied is all important enough. If he was just going around calling himself Nhlapo Sisulu and he had no influence on any student on campus, it wouldn't matter.
So basically you're saying
issue. He's got an influence.
So it's not just about the fact that he lied, it's about the fact that his lie has an influence on his position and the role that he can play in them.
Exactly.
So Tokelo, I just want to know, as you're part of the EFF, why are you guys closing ranks on the support? Like, are you guys almost saying that from the EFF you guys have no issues then with the dishonesty?
All right. First of all, let me clarify one thing. The journalists and the fronts and the lecturers, let's just be clear here. There is a power dynamic that exists between the student journalist and the lecturer. So we must not just dismiss that. The lecturer have a power over the student, and very often, because I've had the privilege of working as a student journalist in Vuvuzela, the lecturers have the power to say, no, this is not newsworthy. They have the influence on the angle of the story and so forth. And the fronts of this world were complicit in the destruction of this young man. So what we are saying is, assuming that the claims by Wits Vuvuzela are true, right? We are saying that what was the agency of publishing the story now? We don't find the agency. And finally, look, if the young man is dishonest, there's clearly a bigger thing that's happening here, in which VOWFM completely missed it simply because they wanted to publish a sensational story.
Thank you so much,
We are
Tokelo.
saying that VOWFM cannot just publish stories simply because it's true. Tokelo got heartbroken in high school. They published it on the front page. Why did they publish it? Because it's fact. We cannot have that type of journalism.
Thank you so much, Tokelo. And in closing, what are your closing comments?
Come again?
What are your closing comments with regard to the issue? Or is what you just said the final statement of what you feel about the article?
Okay. In our final comment, we say that, look, we don't want to enter into a debate of whether or not the man's claims of being a Sisulu are true or not. But we think that VOWFM was irresponsible of publishing the story at this crucial time when students are writing the exam. But second of all, I think that in the publishing of the story, VOWFM should have considered all the factors, because we see no agency in publishing the story at the moment. If the young man has lied to the public about his identity, he needs help. He needs to go to CCDU and be helped with, psychological whatever, and his self-confidence.
Thank you so much, Tokelo.
Thank
you so much for bringing the views of the EFF. And Professor Franz, we just want to know, in closing, if you don't mind also mentioning a few of the comments that he stated about the timing of the release of the article. What is your closing comment on the article?
Look, on the timing, one doesn't go around planning the release of stories to fit in with various kind of things that are happening out there. I mean, certainly there was no intention to time it to wreck anybody's exam. The research was done, it was finished, the story was published. It's hard to understand what benefit there would have been from, putting it off, and we wouldn't have known till when. I just want to also say, and I think Rofhi's put it really well, there's clear public interest here. I mean, and it's really interesting that Tokelo didn't really respond to your question or to the point made that we don't want to be lied to. As a campus community, we don't want a public life that is based on people misrepresenting themselves. It's a problem. It's a real problem.
Sure.
And then, the other thing, and I come back to the point that I was trying to make at the beginning, I am concerned about some of the tone of the criticism. And by all means, we have no problem with confronting, the criticism that there is. We'll come into the studio again. We'll answer whatever that people want to say. But really, to have tweets that threaten physical violence against the reporters, and I was concerned that Tokelo didn't choose to respond to that, because it would have been an easy thing to say, look, we disagree, but we don't. That's a step too far. That's something we'd associate ourselves with. He chose not to do that, which is a real pity.
Thank you all for coming into studio.